My name is Sharry. I'm the executive director of America's Voice. We're a pro-immigrant, communications-oriented NGO based in Washington, D.C. Well, in our work, what we're trying to do is to use communications as a means to create political space for policy change. So we don't see it as an end in and of itself. It's a strategy, but it's an essential strategy. We live in a media saturated age, and we're a species that relates to each other through stories, through narratives. So, how can we employ narratives to create political will for policy change? That's the work that we do. You can have a lot of voters, you can have a huge membership, you can have a lot of resources, but if you don't have a compelling narrative, it's going to be very difficult to win. Let me hasten to add, though, that a compelling narrative is not all you need. That is the mouth that you speak with, but you need the entire body of good ideas, of political strength, of allies that support your cause, and ultimately public sentiment that begins to support what you're asking for. But without a compelling narrative, it's very difficult to connect with an audience that's getting saturated with messages from marketers and from politicians and from cultural leaders. And the point is that we need to compete effectively by breaking through with a compelling story that gets people to say, yeah, I agree with that. So I'll give you an example. Um, we've worked for many, many years with immigrant youth in America that are commonly called dreamers. People who were brought at the average age of 6 years old. They're now the average age of 26 years old, and they've been undocumented. President Obama gave them work permits in a controversial executive action. It's now before the Supreme Court. Donald Trump and his administration wants to take those work permits away and subject these people to deportation. So we've worked for a long time on how do we talk about these young immigrants in a way that is most compelling. Well, the narrative themes that we hit all the time is that we don't say these are young immigrants who want to be American. We say these are young Americans. That it's time for the government to recognize these young Americans formally. They are Americans in all but paperwork. There's no gap between immigrant and American. These are Americans who pledged allegiance every day at school, who many of whom have gone to university, who contribute mightily, who have families. Some of them are construction workers and home helpers. Some of them are doctors and lawyers. It's time. So when the Supreme Court had a big hearing on this case, we had thousands of people on the steps of the Supreme Court chanting in unison, "Home is here." That was the name of the campaign in the run-up. So the narrative isn't, please do what's nice for these desiring immigrants. It's, these are Americans. The question is whether the government is going to do the right thing or not. That's the kind of, and so we have 80% support among the public. In the briefs that are filed with the Supreme Court, we had business, labor, universities, mayors, governors, labor unions, everybody weighing in saying, find a way to make sure these young Americans can continue to contribute to the only country they've really known. And that's that example of how by having a narrative that we've thought through and worked on, not only ourselves, but with our allies, that we can create what we call a wind tunnel. We operate with volume and velocity. We beat the drum so that it's heard and it breaks through. And quite frankly, we don't know what the Supreme Court will decide. There's a conservative majority that is closer to Trump than to our point of view. But we won the day in terms of how America understands this high stakes issue. Let me say, quite honestly, the most challenging part of the work we do is to figure out how we can build the strongest possible base of unity so that we're going forward together. We have activists that want to move the needle in a 25-year time frame. We have advocates who want to focus on particular issues but not muddy the water with other issues. And we have people who are trying to appeal to skeptics who, quite frankly, need a different treatment. So organizing ourselves is the most difficult thing. Generally speaking, the way I think of it is that we have a movement of pro-immigrant Americans and that we need different campaigns that work on issues and maybe appeal to different audiences. The good news is on the example of dreamers who are threatened under President Trump with deportation, is that it is very unifying. So those who are more militant talk about how this is racist and we've got to stop a white supremacist president who wants to get rid of brown people. And we can speak to the middle and saying, hey, wait a minute, these are the folks that are teaching our kids and taking care of our patients in hospitals and live in our communities and our taxpayers and really should just be welcomed as the Americans they already are. And so we often talk about we strive for unity but not uniformity. We understand and accept there's going to be different messages and different messengers, but if we can have a context of dreamers are us, or Trump's cruelty needs to be replaced with constructive solutions, or Trump is taking a wrecking ball to the Statue of Liberty and we need to revive the American idea where we all come from different places, but we're united by shared ideas and ideals. That those messages can break through and maybe different messengers use them, but what comes through to the public is a powerful breakthrough in how they understand what's going on. Oh, I'm not so sure. I think number one, it's important to establish that strategic communications is essential. It's not the only thing. You can't just story tell your way out of no power. You can't propose policies that just don't resonate with voters. So, and it takes time. So for us, what's important is that, to be blunt, we think of our narrative work as the tip of the spear or as the vocalization of the movement. But we need electoral mobilization, our legs. We need community organizing, which are our arms. We need research and direct advocacy with policymakers, which is the brain. So do you need the mouth that's vocalizing what we stand for and the stories that we want to penetrate? Yes. Can't win without it, but you need the whole body in order to produce the kind of momentum that creates the possibility for public education breakthroughs, for public opinion shifts, and for policy changes. So we talk a lot about how important it is for people to be authentic in what they speak, what they say, but also to connect with audiences and to know that. I would add courage, resilience, and persistence as the things that matter. You have to have courage to speak up in a on a controversial set of issues in a fraught public opinion climate. You need to dust yourself off when you make mistakes and get back in there. And you got to stay with it over time because that's what makes the incremental changes that lead to systemic change.